They told you that if you love deeply, if you give all of yourself, he will never leave. They told you that devotion wins loyalty. But no one warned you of the hunger that hides in his eyes when he knows you'll never walk away. No one prepared you for the way your softness becomes his playground when you are too afraid to be the storm. And now, here you are, exhausted, questioning, clinging to texts that never come and promises that dissolved in silence. The truth is brutal, sacred, and alchemical. Sometimes love begins not with more giving, but with the holy act of restraint. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. These words are not just poetic, they are a direct invitation to stop mistaking attachment for destiny. Every time you chase him, wait for him, shrink for him, you are living out a story that does not belong to your awakened self. Ignoring a man is not cruelty, it is reclamation. It is the moment your psyche decides to burn the scripts written by wounds and rewrite them with the hand of sovereignty. When done right, it doesn't just make him chase you, it makes you remember who you are. You see, feminine energy is not passive, it is magnetic. It does not beg, it does not plead, it does not contort to be chosen. It stands in the full moon of its own radiance and allows the unworthy to fall away. When you ignore him from that place, not from bitterness but from clarity, you don't just shift the dynamic. You dismantle an entire karmic loop. This is not a game. This is a return to sacred balance. The man who once ignored your feelings will start to feel his own in your absence. The man who once took your presence for granted will begin to notice the void your silence creates. And not because you played a trick, but because energy speaks. When you stop performing love and start embodying truth, he has no choice but to respond or disappear. Either way, you win. Because the woman who has learned to withhold her light from those who misuse it is the woman who can never be caged. Again, every time you over-explain, overgive, or overstay, a part of you whispers, "Please don't leave." But the real heartbreak isn't that he might go. It's that you abandoned yourself to make him stay. Ignoring a man, really ignoring him, isn't about waiting for him to text back. It's about going no contact with the part of you that believes love must be earned through suffering. That part is not your truth. That part is your wound. When you begin to ignore from wholeness, not from wounded pride, you activate a mirror in him. Suddenly, he must face the echo of his own absence. Suddenly, your silence screams louder than your pleas ever did. It's in this vacuum that he begins to remember the way you laughed, the scent of your hair, the way your presence softened the edges of his world. But more importantly, it is in this silence that you remember you were always the source. You don't have to chase what aligns with you. You don't have to convince someone to see your worth. You don't have to scream to be heard by someone who has no intention of listening. Your power lies in your ability to walk away, not to punish him, but to protect your soul. To say, "I choose peace over potential. I choose dignity over drama. I choose self-respect over breadcrumbs." And make no mistake, the moment you stop responding to his inconsistency, he will feel it, not just in his ego, but in his spirit. Because deep down, even he knows he has lost something divine, something rare. The feminine that refuses to be bought, tamed, or silenced. The one who turns her back not to manipulate, but to ascend. So, many women ask, what if I ignore him and he never comes back? But the real question is, what if you never ignore him and you never come back to yourself? What if your silence isn't a tactic, but a ritual? What if it's the doorway to your own liberation? When you stop waiting for his call and start listening to your inner voice, you stop orbiting around his validation, and you start becoming the center of your own universe. Ignoring a man correctly means breaking a trauma bond. It means interrupting a cycle that keeps you small. It means letting go of the illusion that if you love him just a little harder, he will change. No, he changes when you change, when you stop rewarding his emotional laziness with your emotional labor. When you stop showing up for someone who's never truly shown up for you. You were not born to be a placeholder. You were not meant to dim your light for someone still learning how to see. You are not here to teach a man how to love while bleeding out from your own unhealed wounds. The moment you turn inward, the moment you choose stillness over reaction, something shifts in you, in him, in the field between you. There is something deeply spiritual about restraint, about knowing your worth so intimately that you no longer feel the need to prove it, about choosing silence not as punishment, but as poetry. Because in that silence, he will hear everything he refused to listen to before, and you will finally hear yourself. When a woman withdraws her energy with love, not rage, the universe pays attention. Patterns break, timelines shift, men awaken. But none of that matters more than this. You awaken. You stop being a mirror for his potential and start being a lighthouse for your own becoming. You stop being his lesson and start being your own. Liberation. Not every man deserves access to your softness. Not every man has earned the right to witness your unraveling. And that's okay, because the one who is meant for you will not need to be chased, reminded, or convinced. He will feel your absence as clearly as he once ignored your presence, and if he doesn't, he was never truly there. Sometimes ignoring him is the loudest declaration of self-worth you will ever make, not because it will change him, but because it transforms you. It teaches you how to sit with discomfort instead of begging for crumbs. It teaches you to choose presence over performance. And most of all, it teaches you that your silence is not emptiness. It is power waiting to be remembered. When you stop answering his late-night texts, when you no longer rush to respond to his half-hearted efforts, you are telling the universe, I'm no longer available for mediocrity. I'm no longer addicted to false hope. I'm no longer in love with the pain of being unseen. That is the turning point, the sacred detachment that breaks the chains of emotional servitude and births a new kind of woman, untamed, sovereign, whole. He will notice. At first, it might just be confusion, a pause, a curiosity. Why has her energy shifted? Why is she not reaching out like she used to? He may test the waters with vague messages or shallow attempts to regain your attention. But you are no longer in the business of responding to echoes. You are no longer flattered by the bare minimum. You have become fluent in the language of aligned energy, and his chaos no longer speaks to your soul. Ignoring him does not mean suppressing your feelings. It means honoring them in private, with gentleness and ritual. It means crying if you must, journaling through the ache, lighting a candle for the girl you used to be, the one who waited, begged, hoped, and then choosing not to betray her again. That is what healing looks like. Not always loud or perfect, but sacred and fiercely committed to truth. Many will tell you that you must play hard to get. But this is not a game. This is your psyche, refusing to reenact an old wound. This is your inner child saying, no more chasing, no more proving, no more performing for love. When you ignore him, you are not being cold. You are being precise. You are cutting the energetic cords that kept you bound to a fantasy, and you are doing it with grace. Your withdrawal is not a punishment, it's a mirror. And if he's capable of real reflection, he'll see it. He'll feel the void left by your absence, not because you were clingy or needy, but because your energy was rare. He may not have valued it when it was freely given, but now he must contend with the silence. And that silence will ask him the question you never did. Was she ever truly seen? Sometimes the most radical act of love is to walk away. Not because you've given up, but because you've grown up. Because you finally understand that your heart is not a bargaining chip, that your body is not a battlefield, that your spirit was never meant to shrink for someone else's comfort. Ignoring him is not the end. It is the beginning of your return to self. There is a sacred fire that ignites when a woman stops begging to be chosen. That fire does not burn others, it burns illusions. It sears through every story that told you love must be earned with sacrifice. It incinerates the belief that you are too much, too sensitive, too emotional. And in its flame, you are reborn. Not as someone who needs to be chased, but as someone who finally remembers her worth. You are not here to be his afterthought. You are not here to be the emotional caretaker of his unprocessed wounds. You are here to awaken, to embody the full spectrum of your power, to live from the place where your soul is no longer starving. Ignoring him is not about scarcity, it's about alignment. It's about knowing that you don't have to settle for almost love when you are built for the real thing. In this silence, you'll find space. Space to reconnect with your dreams. Space to nurture your own nervous system. Space to listen to the subtle wisdom of your inner voice. And from that space, you'll no longer feel tempted to break your own heart just to keep someone else around. You'll see his absence not as a tragedy, but as a portal, a chance to rewrite everything. You will begin to see him clearly, not as a soulmate, but as a mirror for your unmet needs, your childhood longings, your unresolved grief. And once you see it, you can choose differently. You can stop romanticizing dysfunction and start romanticizing healing. You can stop calling it love when it's really just familiar pain. That is the gift of ignoring. It gives you the distance to see the truth. He may return, or he may not, but by then you will no longer be waiting. Because the woman who has reclaimed her time, her energy, her voice, she does not sit by the phone. She does not lower her standards. She does not measure her worth by his actions. She walks in purpose, in depth, in radiance. And if he wishes to join her, he must meet her there. There is nothing more magnetic than a woman who no longer seeks permission to exist, who no longer asks, "Am I enough?" but instead affirms, "I am everything." That woman does not chase. She attracts. She does not beg. She receives, and she does not fall apart when he leaves. She rises. Do not underestimate the power of disengagement. When you stop feeding the dynamic with your energy, you starve the dysfunction. You stop playing your part in the pattern. You end the emotional loop that kept you stuck. And from that ending, something beautiful can begin. Not with him, but with you. The choice to ignore him is ultimately the choice to listen to you. To the you that's been buried under years of over-functioning, over-compromising, over-loving. That self is not gone. She's waiting. And with every moment you choose, silence over self-betrayal, you bring her closer to the surface. You breathe her back to life. One day you'll look back and realize the moment you chose silence was the moment you chose rebirth. That you stopped rehearsing the tragedy of being overlooked and started composing the poetry of your own awakening. He might still be in the same cycles, still chasing ghosts, still numb to the sacred, but you will be unrecognizable. Not harder, not colder, but freer. Because the woman who chooses herself becomes untouchable to anything less. He might resurface with sudden clarity, haunted by the absence of your warmth. He might call, text, apologize, promise, but you'll know. You'll feel it in your bones, whether it's real or just regret. And by then, you'll be so rooted in your own value that you won't need to analyze, overthink, or doubt. You'll simply choose, not from fear, but from embodiment. Not to escape loneliness, but to protect your light. You are not obligated to explain your silence. You are not required to justify your healing. You don't owe him a narrative that makes him feel better about the choices he made. Because your growth is not for his comfort, it's for your liberation. It's for the version of you that cried in the dark, questioned her worth, and still chose to rise. There will come a time when you no longer fantasize about his return, but about your own expansion. about what your life could look like when it's no longer centered around convincing someone to stay. That's when you'll know the spell is broken. That's when you'll feel the sacred pulse of your own becoming. And nothing will ever feel like loss again, only release. Ignoring him is not passive. It is active, intentional, fierce. It is not a tactic to make him want you. It is a declaration that you no longer need anyone to validate what you already know. That you are whole, that you are worthy, that you are done dancing for attention in someone else's theater of avoidance. You are writing a new script now, one where you are the author, the muse, and the main character. Some men only understand your value in your absence, and while that truth can be painful, it can also be the very thing that sets you free. Because when someone can't see your worth while you're bleeding love into their hands, they never truly saw you. They saw what you gave. They saw your light. But they never looked into your soul. And now you've turned that gaze inward. You've become your own witness, your own healer, your own home, and that changes everything. Because once you taste the peace of self-ownership, the chaos of emotional chasing will no longer seduce you. Once you know how to hold yourself in silence, the noise of inconsistency becomes unbearable. And in that clarity, you find power. The greatest revenge is not to make him miss you, it's to no longer miss him, to no longer measure your days by his presence, to no longer calculate your joy by his attention. That is real closure, not something he gives, but something you choose. The kind that comes with boundaries, stillness, and a soft, steady yes to yourself. There is a woman inside you who never begged, who never dimmed, who never doubted her own fire. She's been waiting, and every time you ignore what diminishes, you bring her forward. Every time you refuse to settle for emotional crumbs, you crown her. Every time you say no to what hurts, you say yes to her return. This is not about punishing men. This is about healing women, about interrupting the lineage of abandonment, silence, and self-erasure, about standing in the sacred lineage of all, the women who chose themselves and burned for it, and deciding to burn bright instead. This is about alchemy, and you are the gold. You may find that once you're whole, you no longer desire what broke you, that the man you once cried over no longer holds the same pull, that his texts feel empty, his apologies too late, his energy out of sync. And that realization will not shatter you. It will liberate you. Because healing doesn't always look like reunion. It often looks like release. Let him wonder. Let him ache. Let him sit in the space you once filled with warmth, effort, and devotion. That is not cruelty. That is consequence. That is what happens when a woman stops betraying herself. The silence you give is not punishment. It's prophecy, a sacred pause where only the aligned can enter. You are not cold for choosing peace. You are not heartless for choosing solitude. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are wise. You are ancient. You are remembering the kind of love that does not come from another. It radiates from within. So if you're asking, should I ignore him? Ask instead, do I remember who I am? Because if you do, the answer becomes clear, not as a strategy, but as a ceremony. Not as a way to control him, but as a way to reclaim your life. And in that sacred silence, you will find everything you were looking for in his chaos. Now I invite you to reflect. What part of you are you finally ready to stop abandoning? Leave your truth in the comments. This is a space for healing, not hiding. And if this journey has touched something sacred in you, subscribe. This channel is your sanctuary, a place to remember, release, and rise.